My cousin convinced our family I stole our family heirloom. Everyone turned their backs on me. But when I returned on Christmas with evidence, the holiday turned into a courtroom. I always thought family was the one thing you could count on when shit hit the fan. Turns out, that's the biggest lie we tell ourselves. Blood might be thicker than water, but it's also the first to drain away when something valuable goes missing. Look, I need to get this off my chest because I'm straight up seething right now. My grandfather passed away 3 months ago. Pop was always my favorite family member. The guy taught me how to fish, how to change oil in a car, how to look someone in the eye when making a deal. He was old school in all the best ways. No BS, just solid principles and unwavering loyalty. When I was 16 and crashed my first car, he didn't lecture me. He just handed me tools, and we fixed it together over weekends. That was our thing. When Pop died, it hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't prepared for the empty feeling, knowing I couldn't just call him up for advice anymore. The funeral was rough, but I held it together. My cousin Maddox was there acting all broken up, which was rich considering he only visited Pop maybe twice a year. Usually when he needed money, I always found it interesting how he'd suddenly remember his beloved grandfather whenever his gambling habits caught up with him. Anyway, one of Pop's most treasured possessions was this gold pocket watch that came from his grandfather. It had been passed down for generations. Beautiful craftsmanship, with our family crest engraved on the back. Pop always said it would go to someone who truly appreciated family legacy. We all assumed it would be included in the will reading, but surprisingly, it wasn't mentioned. This is where things started getting weird. At the post-funeral gathering at my Aunt Clara's house, Maddox kept bringing up the watch in these casual ways, just dropping comments about how Pop had shown him the watch last month and talked about its value. Something about his tone felt off, but I was grieving and didn't think much of it. Fast forward 2 weeks after the funeral. The family gathered again to go through Pop's belongings at his house. I noticed Maddox volunteering to go through Pop's study alone, which seemed strange since he'd never shown interest in Pop's books or collections before. I was helping my Aunt Skylar sort through kitchen items when we all heard Maddox calling everyone to the study. When we got there, Maddox was standing with this solemn expression, holding open Pop's empty watch box. The watch was gone. Everyone started speculating about where it could be. I suggested maybe Pop had it with him in the hospital or had moved it somewhere safer. That's when I noticed Maddox watching me with this calculating look. Over the next few days, the missing watch became the topic of family conversation. Maddox started mentioning how I'd been in Pop's study alone several times after he died. He wasn't making direct accusations, just planting seeds. I couldn't believe what he was implying, but I stayed calm and reminded everyone that we all had access to the house. Then came the bombshell. A week later, my Aunt Ava called a family meeting. When I arrived, everyone had these grim expressions. Maddox had found an email from a local pawn shop on my laptop, which I'd stupidly left open at a previous family gathering when I stepped out. The email supposedly confirmed an inquiry about selling an antique gold watch. It was completely fabricated. I hadn't sent any such email, but it looked convincing enough. When I tried to explain that this was obviously faked, Maddox unveiled his masterpiece, a bank deposit slip showing a cash deposit to my account for roughly what the watch would be worth, dated 3 days after Pop died. I couldn't understand how he'd managed to create this evidence, but it was detailed enough to make everyone believe him. I've never seen my family turn on someone so fast. My Uncle Fletcher started yelling about how I was always Pop's favorite, how I must have felt entitled to the watch. Aunt Skylar, who I'd been close with my entire life, couldn't even look me in the eye. My cousins, people I grew up with, started bringing up minor childhood incidents as proof of my dishonesty. Character assassination in real time. The worst part wasn't even the accusation. It was how easily they believed I could do this. 30 years of being part of this family, of showing up for every birthday and hospital visit, of helping move furniture and fix cars and attend dance recitals, all erased because Maddox presented some flimsy evidence that I'd stolen a family heirloom. I tried to defend myself, but it was like talking to a wall. No one wanted to hear how ridiculous this was, or question why Maddox suddenly had access to my email or bank information. My protestations just made me look more guilty in their eyes. The family meeting ended with my Aunt Ava informing me that I was no longer welcome at the upcoming Christmas gathering, a 30-year tradition shattered in one afternoon. I left that house with this cold, hard feeling settling in my chest. I've never experienced anything like it, this mixture of betrayal, rage, and clarity. On the drive home, something changed in me. The shock wore off, and all that remained was this laser-focused anger. Three things became absolutely clear to me. 1. Maddox had stolen the watch himself and set me up to take the fall. 2. My family had shown me exactly how little my word was worth to them. 3. I was going to make all of them regret this. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table until sunrise planning. I've always been methodical, something else Pop taught me, and now that meticulousness would serve a new purpose. If they wanted to believe I was a thief without evidence, I'd show them what actual evidence looked like. First step, figure out exactly what Maddox did with the watch. He must have pawned it somewhere, and if he was stupid enough to frame me this sloppily, he probably didn't go far to sell it. Second step, discover why he needed money so badly he'd steal from his dead grandfather. I had a feeling his gambling hadn't improved. Third step, document everything with absolute precision. I'm not interested in clearing my name anymore. That ship has sailed. What I want now is for Maddox to lose everything, and for my family to understand exactly what they've done. They chose him over me? Fine. They can watch as I dismantle his life, piece by piece. The Christmas gathering is in 6 weeks, plenty of time to build my case. They think they've seen the last of me, but I'll be making a special appearance, with receipts. And when I'm done, Maddox won't just be exposed as a thief, he'll wish he'd never even heard of that watch. The family that raised me died the day they chose to believe I could steal from Pop. I'm not seeking reconciliation, I'm seeking justice, and I always finish what I start. Part 2, coming soon, because this revenge plot is just getting started. Update. First off, thanks to everyone who read my last post and sent supportive messages. I wasn't expecting that kind of response. Some of you suggested I just cut my family off and move on with my life. Trust me, I considered it. But that's not how I operate. When someone tries to destroy my reputation and turn my entire family against me, walking away isn't an option. Not for me. It's been 3 weeks since my family branded me a thief, and I've been busy, really busy. Look, I've always been methodical. It's just how my brain works. Pop used to say I had the mind of a chess player, always thinking 5 moves ahead. So the morning after the family ambush, I sat down with a notebook and mapped out exactly how I was going to dismantle my cousin Maddox's life. Not in a criminal way, I'm not an idiot, but in a way that would expose every lie and make him face consequences. I started with the basics. If Maddox had stolen and sold the watch, there would be a trail. No matter how careful he thought he'd been, people always leave traces. My first move was to compile a list of every pawn shop within a 50-mile radius of our town. There were 23. I figured Maddox wouldn't go to the closest ones, but he's also lazy as hell, so he wouldn't drive hours away either. For 10 days straight, I visited pawn shops after work, showing pictures of the watch, asking questions, getting nowhere. Most places were helpful enough, but no one recognized the watch. By day 11, I was starting to question my approach. Then it hit me. Maddox wasn't just lazy, he was predictable. There was a pawn shop near the casino he frequents in the next county over. It was outside my initial search radius, but it made perfect sense. The moment I walked in, I knew I'd hit the jackpot. The owner's face changed when I showed him the picture of Pop's watch. He got all weird and evasive, saying he couldn't discuss transactions. That told me everything I needed to know. I changed tactics, explaining that this was a stolen family heirloom, and that I wasn't interested in causing trouble for his business. I just wanted information. After some back and forth, he confirmed that a watch matching that description had been pawned there about 3 months ago. The timing lined up perfectly with Pop's death. I asked if they had security footage, knowing most places keep it for 90 days. They did, but wouldn't show me without proper authorization. Fair enough. I took note of the exact date and time from their records and left, already planning my next move. I spent the next day researching my legal options. Turns out, if you file a police report for a stolen item, they can request security footage as part of their investigation. I had to be careful here. I needed to report the watch stolen without directly accusing Maddox, since I didn't have concrete proof yet. I filed the report, focusing on the fact that the family heirloom disappeared after my grandfather's death and had recently been located at this specific pawn shop. While waiting for that to play out, I shifted focus to understanding why Maddox would do this. The gambling was obvious, but I needed specific. Through a mutual friend who works at the same company as Maddox, I learned he'd been taking suspicious amounts of sick time lately. His car was also mysteriously in the shop for the past month, forcing him to bum rides to work. Classic signs of financial trouble. I dug deeper. My cousin Carter, who's still talking to me, bless him, mentioned that Maddox had been hitting up family members for loans recently. Nothing huge, $200 here, $500 there, but it added up. Carter also let slip that Maddox had been complaining about calls from collection agencies. Interesting. Then I got a break that changed everything. Remember that mutual friend at Maddox's company? He overheard Maddox arguing on the phone with someone named Marco about needing more time and having a plan to get the money. It wasn't hard to figure out that Marco was a bookie or loan shark. Maddox was in deeper than I thought. With a name to work with, I did some digging online and through a few connections. Found out Marco runs an underground poker game and makes loans to desperate gamblers at insane interest rates. The kind of loans that come with threats rather than paperwork. This was perfect. The pieces were falling into place. Maddox stole the watch to pay off Marco, then framed me to cover his tracks. But I still needed hard evidence to prove it to my family. 2 weeks into my investigation, the police came through. They'd obtained the security footage from the pawn shop and, sure enough, there was Maddox, clear as day, pawning Pop's watch. I was allowed to view the footage, and the officer handling the case seemed sympathetic to my situation. He explained that they would be contacting Maddox for questioning, but warned me that family theft cases can be complicated, especially when ownership of the item might be disputed. I understood what he was saying. This might not lead to criminal charges, but that was never my primary goal anyway. I now had proof that Maddox had pawned the watch, and that was enough to start with. I requested a copy of the report for my records, which they provided. Around this time, I also had an interesting conversation with the pawn shop owner. Apparently, Maddox had only gotten a fraction of what the watch was actually worth, about $3,000 for something valued closer to $15,000. The owner admitted he knew it was worth more, but figured Maddox was desperate. Predatory? Yes. Helpful to my case? Also, yes. Now came the part that still makes me smile when I think about it. I took $3,000 of my savings and bought the watch back from the pawn shop. The owner was reluctant at first, but when I explained the whole situation and showed him the police report, he relented. Maybe he felt bad, or maybe he just wanted to avoid more police involvement. Either way, Pop's watch was back in my possession. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Remember Marco? I decided to pay him a visit. This was probably the riskiest part of my plan, but I'm not the type to half-ass things. I found him at the bar where he supposedly conducts business. Our conversation was enlightening. I was straightforward. I explained that Maddox was my cousin, that he'd stolen from our family, and that I understood he owed Marco money. I didn't threaten or intimidate. I simply offered to buy Maddox's debt. Marco was suspicious at first, but money talks. After some negotiation, I purchased Maddox's gambling debt for 80 cents on the dollar. It cost me nearly all my saving, $12,000 to cover Maddox's $15,000 debt. But now I owned what Maddox owed. The power that gave me was worth every penny. With this leverage, I had Marco provide written confirmation of Maddox's gambling history, dates, amounts, everything. It was all the proof I needed to show exactly why Maddox had stolen the watch and framed me. But I still wasn't satisfied. This was about more than just the watch now. This was about how easily my family had turned on me, how quickly 30 years of trust had evaporated. So I kept digging. I started reaching out to extended family members who weren't at the original confrontation. What I learned made my blood boil even hotter. Maddox hadn't just accused me of stealing the watch. He'd been systematically poisoning the family against me for months, telling my Aunt Ava I'd made comments about her weight behind her back, suggesting to Uncle Fletcher that I thought his new business was a stupid idea, implying to others that I'd been skipping family events because I thought I was too good for them now. None of it was true, but all of it had contributed to how quickly they believed I could steal from Pop. Maddox had been laying groundwork, and I hadn't even noticed. That realization hit me hard. I'd been oblivious while he undermined me, and that was partly on me. With all my evidence gathered, the police report, the security footage, the receipt for the watch, Marco's documentation of Maddox's gambling debts, and testimonials from family members about Maddox's lies, I had everything I needed. But I wasn't going to just email it all out or confront Maddox privately. No, this deserved a special delivery. Christmas was approaching, the family gathering I'd been explicitly uninvited from. The perfect stage for what I had planned. 2 days before Christmas, I received a text from my Aunt Clara, asking if I'd calmed down and was ready to admit what I'd done so the family could heal for the holidays. The audacity was almost impressive. I didn't respond. Let them think I was sulking in exile. They had no idea what was coming. I spent Christmas Eve finalizing my presentation. Everything organized, backed up, and ready to go. I even wrapped Pop's watch in the original box with a special note inside. Not for Maddox. He didn't deserve to touch it again, but for the family to see. Christmas morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began. Calm. Not the fake kind, where you're just suppressing rage, but genuine tranquility. I knew exactly what I was about to do, and I was at peace with it. Whatever happened with my family afterward, reconciliation or permanent estrangement, would be their choice. I was done letting others define who I was or what I deserved. I got dressed in my best suit, the one Pop had helped me pick out for my first real job interview, put all my evidence in a leather portfolio, placed the wrapped watch box in my coat pocket, and headed to Aunt Ava's house for the family Christmas gathering. They weren't expecting me. They had no idea what was about to hit them. But in a few hours, my cousin Maddox's carefully constructed world of lies was going to come crashing down around him, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. Update 2. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Let me tell you, it tastes even better served on Christmas morning with the whole family watching. I pulled up to Aunt Ava's house at exactly 11:30 a.m. I knew their Christmas schedule by heart. Presents opened by 10, big family brunch at 11, and everyone settling into the living room around 11:30 to digest and chat before dinner prep started. Perfect timing for maximum audience. Sitting in my car, I took a moment to check my leather portfolio one last time. Everything was in order. Police report, security footage, screenshots, pawn shop receipt, Marco's documentation of Maddox's gambling debts, and statements from family members detailing his other lies. Pop's watch was in my pocket, wrapped in its original box with a note inside. I wasn't nervous. I was straight up ready. The walk to the front door felt like something out of a movie. Snow crunching under my feet. Christmas music faintly audible from inside. My breath visible in the cold air. I didn't knock. I used the key I still had from when I house-sit for Aunt Ava last summer. The element of surprise was crucial. Walking into that house was surreal. The familiar smell of Aunt Ava's turkey, the Christmas tree in the corner with its mismatched ornaments collected over decades, stockings hanging from the fireplace, including mine, which someone had apparently put up out of habit before remembering I was persona non grata. For a split second, homesickness hit me. Then I remembered why I was there, and that feeling hardened back into resolve. I stood in the entrance to the living room for a good 5 seconds before anyone noticed. Uncle Fletcher saw me first. His face went from relaxed holiday cheer to shocked anger so fast It would have been comical under different circumstances. Then Aunt Schuyler gasped, and suddenly all eyes were on me. 15 family members, frozen in various positions around the room, staring like they'd seen a ghost. Maddox was sprawled on the couch, a plate of cookies balanced on his stomach. When he saw me, he nearly choked on whatever he was eating. The fear that flashed across his face was the first hint of satisfaction I'd felt in months. Aunt Ava recovered first, standing up and demanding to know what I thought I was doing there. I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I walked to the center of the room, placed my portfolio on the coffee table, and announced that I had brought them all a Christmas gift. The truth. The next few minutes were chaotic. Several people started talking at once. Uncle Fletcher tried to suggest I leave before things got ugly. Cousin Carter, bless him, told everyone to shut up and let me speak. Aunt Clara started crying because of course she did. Through it all, Maddox sat eerily still, like a rabbit, hoping the wolf wouldn't notice him if he didn't move. I waited for the noise to die down. I didn't raise my voice or get emotional. I just stood there, making eye contact with each person until, one by one, they fell silent. This wasn't going to be a shouting match. This was going to be a methodical execution. Once I had their attention, I opened my portfolio and began. I explained that after being accused of stealing Pop's watch, I had conducted my own investigation. I laid out everything chronologically, presenting each piece of evidence as I went. First, the police report showing the watch had been located at a pawn shop in the next county. Then, screenshots from the security footage clearly showing Maddox pawning the watch 3 days after Pop died. The room temperature seemed to drop with each new revelation. No one looked at Maddox, but everyone's body language shifted away from him. It was subtle, but unmistakable, the first physical manifestation of the tide turning. I continued by explaining how Maddox had fabricated the evidence against me, the fake email and the doctored bank deposit slip. I'd discovered he'd gained access to my laptop when I left it unattended during a previous family gathering, and had created the email draft himself. The bank slip was simply photoshopped, amateur hour stuff, but effective enough to fool people who wanted to believe it. By now, Maddox was fidgeting, his eyes darting around, looking for escape route. Aunt Ava was staring at the floor, her knuckles white, as she gripped the armrests of her chair. Uncle Fletcher's face had gone from angry to ashen. No one interrupted me. No one challenged a single point. The silence was deafening. Then I shifted to why Maddox had done this. I detailed his gambling addiction, the mounting debts, the threats from Marco. I revealed that Maddox had been systematically lying about me to the family for months, poisoning them against me, so when the time came to accuse me of theft, they'd be primed to believe it. Several family members exchanged glances at this point. Aunt Schuyler looked physically ill. Cousin Carter nodded slightly, confirming what I was saying. The family was starting to realize just how thoroughly they'd been manipulated. Maddox finally broke his silence, trying to claim I was making all this up out of spite. His voice was shaking. No one looked at him. I didn't even acknowledge his interruption. I simply pulled out my phone, queued up the security footage video, and passed it around. Watching their faces as they saw, with their own eyes, Maddox handing over Pop's watch was satisfying doesn't begin to cover it. Now came the moment I'd been waiting for. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the wrapped watch box. The room went still again. I explained that I had used my own money to buy back the family heirloom that Maddox had stolen. I unwrapped it slowly, opened the box, and there it was, Pops's gold pocket watch, gleaming in the Christmas tree lights. Aunt Clara started sobbing. Uncle Fletcher muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like a threat directed at Maddox. Aunt Ava tried to reach for the watch, but I closed the box before she could touch it. I wasn't done yet, not even close. Look, I could have stopped there. I had vindicated myself. I had exposed Maddox. I had recovered the watch. But that wouldn't have been enough. Not after what they did to me. Not after how easily they believed the worst about me. So I continued. I revealed my masterstroke. I now owned Maddox's gambling debt. Every cent he owed to Marco was now owed to me. I explained exactly what that meant. I could demand immediate payment, which he couldn't provide. I could set up a payment plan with interest, which would financially cripple him for years, or I could forgive the debt entirely, which wasn't going to happen. Maddox was financially mine. The color drained from Maddox's face. This wasn't just about the watch anymore. This was about his future, his freedom, his reputation. Everything he had tried to take from me, I now controlled for him. I laid out my terms. Maddox would sign a notarized confession admitting to stealing the watch and framing me. He would pay me back the $15,000 I spent purchasing his debt, plus the $3,000 I paid to recover the watch, with interest. He would do this by selling his car, taking a second job, and living on a strict budget that I would oversee. Until the debt was paid in full, he would have no financial freedom. Additionally, he would be excluded from all family gatherings that I attended. If I showed up and he was there, he would leave immediately. The family could see him on their own time if they chose, but never when I was present. This wasn't negotiable. As for the watch, I announced that I wouldn't be keeping it, nor would I be returning it to the family collective. Instead, I had decided to donate it to a horological museum in Pop's name. None of them deserved it, not after how quickly they'd turned on one of their own. The silence that followed was heavy with shame. Aunt Ava tried to speak, attempting some kind of apology, but I cut her off. I wasn't interested in apology. I explained that trust, once broken, cannot be repaired. They had shown me who they really were, and I had believed them the first time. Then I addressed each family member individually, listing specific ways they had failed me, not just in believing Maddox, but in how eagerly they had participated in turning against me, how quickly they had rewritten our shared history to paint me as someone capable of stealing from Pop, how not one of them, except Carter, had even considered giving me the benefit of the doubt. By the time I finished, several people were crying. Maddox looked physically ill. Someone, I think it was Uncle Fletcher, suggested we all take some time to process everything and talk again after the holidays. I agreed, but made it clear that processing wouldn't change my terms. This wasn't a negotiation. I placed the contract I had drawn up on the coffee table in front of Maddox. It detailed everything I'd just explained, in legally binding language. I told him he could sign it now, or he could explain to Marco why the new holder of his debt wasn't receiving payment. His choice. He signed it. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely form his signature, but he signed it. With that done, I picked up my portfolio and prepared to leave. Aunt Clara asked if I was staying for Christmas dinner. The absurdity of the question almost made me laugh. I declined and explained that I had made other plans, true friends who had stood by me when my so-called family had not. As I reached the door, Aunt Ava called my name. She asked if there was any way to make this right, any path to forgiveness. I turned and looked at her, really looked at her, and told her the honest truth: no. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. This wasn't a movie with a neat resolution. This was real life, and in real life, actions have permanent consequences. I left them there, surrounded by their Christmas decorations and their shame. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not happy exactly, but vindicated, powerful, free. Maddox texted me the next day, begging for leniency. I didn't respond. He texted again the day after, offering to do anything to make it right. I blocked his number. 3 days later, I received his first debt payment, the proceeds from selling his car. I put it directly into an investment account labeled Consequences. It's been 2 months since that Christmas confrontation. I've received numerous calls and messages from family members, ranging from angry to apologetic. I've responded to none of them except Carter, who has become something of an ally in enforcing Maddox's payment schedule. Maddox now works 2 jobs and lives in a studio apartment. He reports his expenses to me weekly. He hates me, but he fears me more. Every payment he makes is a reminder that betrayal has a price. As for the watch, it sits in a display case at the museum, with a small plaque dedicated to Pop. I visit it sometimes. It reminds me that legacy isn't about objects or even family names. It's about principles. It's about standing your ground when everyone else abandons you. It's about making sure that those who betray you regret it for the rest of their lives. That's the real family heirloom Pop left me, and unlike the watch, no one can ever take it away.